So, as you might know, I made a few videos on electrical switches. I explained why I renamed them because I thought they had idiotic names. But the idea behind naming them came from my broader concept. I have a concept about electrical circuits that's even broader, and I didn't go into it because people generally don't click on my videos. But I thought, what the hell? I woke up today and I'm stuck on this planet, so I might as well make another video and share this. Maybe someone will find this information useful, and maybe someday my ideas and terminology might actually end up in the code book, in the National Electrical Code book. Who knows? Because I think these ideas are pretty damn good. So you might recall I renamed electrical switches, and here's the 3 names that I chose. You can see that in my other videos. Check that out. And I renamed them, and I based the whole thing on one word. My goal when I make videos is to simplify and standardize, whether it be with music, grammar, or electricity. That's the whole deal. I clean things up and find things that other people missed over the many, many years. So when I renamed the switches and I revisited the concept of the electrical circuit, okay, I used one word. I used one word to clean everything up. And the word is station. Because Nikola Tesla, one of the greatest thinking men of all time, ranks right up there with Isaac Newton and Michael Faraday, right? For about 1 year or so, he had a building and they called it the Tesla Experimental Station. Excuse me. It was in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and it was only there for a short time, but it was called Tesla Experimental Station. And I couldn't stop thinking about this word, because at this station, he was working on wireless power transmission, because Tesla, long before anybody else, envisioned wireless communication and wireless power source for people's homes. He did that. So the word station was prominent. And if you saw my other videos, you'll see that I call this a single station switch, not single pole. That's a horrible name. I call this a double station switch, not a 3-way. 3-way is a horrible, stupid name. And I call this a 4-way switch. Now this is not a 4-way, but it looks just like this. The terminals look like this in the back. I'll explain that shortly in more detail. So let me go downstairs and I'll continue this discussion, and I'll show you how I based everything on the word station and how I envision electrical circuits as a station system. Okay, we'll do that shortly. Okay, I'm downstairs at my workbench. It will probably be easier to show you this using the bench. So what happened was, from Nikola Tesla, I saw the word station and I focused on it. Couldn't stop thinking about it. And in my mind, I came up with what I call the circuit station perspective. In other words, just kind of a concept, an idea. Then I developed circuit station terminology. I developed the terms that I like. And then ultimately I end up with what I call a circuit station system. In other words, it's the electrical circuit system. It's just a different way of seeing it, different way of envisioning it. And it helped me learn electrical circuits when I was younger. About 35 years ago, I worked for a construction company, and the owner was an electrician, and he was a great electrician. And he tried to teach me things, but I had to still ultimately simply envision these things in my mind my own way. That's the only way I could understand it. So I developed my own thinking on this. So the whole system is based on the station, okay? That's the physical location at which and the components with which a specific electrical circuit function occurs. Okay? It's just an idea. It's just theory. The parts and the cables and all that stuff are still the same. It's just a different way of looking at it. And in my system here, my station system, you have an outlet, which could be considered your framework of your system, a device, which could be considered the hardware, and there's some form of protection, which I'll explain shortly. All right? Now, the reason why this bothered me for so long was because there's all these terms in the electrical trade. There's all these different terms. There's hundreds of terms. And most of them I find are confusing, and some of them are just outright crap. But for about roughly 130 years since we've been using AC current, there's been all these different terms, and no two people can come to agreement on them. You can read about this on the internet. You can read the National Electrical Code Book, and you can go on web pages and read what professionals have to say, but usually they don't agree. They don't categorically agree on what these terms mean. You know, outlet, receptacle, plug, socket, device, there's just so many. So here's just a short list of many common terms that you might hear. And I thought, you know what, I need to clean this up. It's a mess. And that's what I do. I clean stuff up. So we talked about the station. All right. The station has several components. So let's take a look at that. So the first component of what I call the station is the outlet. I call it a point on an electrical circuit at which system current can be made available through the use of an attached device, and the device can be standalone or fixtured. I'll talk about that shortly. The outlet is not the device, it's not the fixture, and it's not a contact point. Ordinarily, once these things are installed, you don't see them and you ordinarily don't touch them, okay? It's not a contact point. So this would be the framework of the station, right? That's how I envision that part. And these are examples of the electrical boxes that can be found at the store when you go to buy your equipment. You have what they call a handy box, a 4-inch box. They call this a switch or receptacle box, and this is an octagonal box. They call this a 4-inch box, which is stupid. They call it 4-inch because diagonally, okay, it measures 4 inches, but it's actually a 3.5-inch square. I don't know why they do that. And that's the whole point of why I make these videos, is because naming and terminology and all that stuff has been so jumbled up and messed up for so many years that people just call stuff what they call it, and they don't even know why they're calling it that way, because it's inaccurate. Anyway, so I'm going to clean that up. Now, the next component in what I call the station is the device, right? I refer to the device as the hardware component of the station. It can be a receptacle or a switch, all right? The device does not consume power. It doesn't do work, but it is a contact device, all right? The receptacle can have two states. One is potential, in other words, potential for power, for current, or active. And the switch can have two states. It either allows the current to go through or it denies the current, okay? You could consider the device, you can consider it an interface between the outlet and the appliance, all right? The appliance that's using power. You could consider it as an interface. That's just kind of a thing I threw in. People don't do that, but maybe someday they will. So that's your next component, the device. And here's a receptacle. All right, that's a device. But more specifically, as we'll talk about, this is a plug receptacle because you plug something into it. This is a switch. You would call it single pole. I call it single station switch. Much better name for this, because you'll find this switch, one switch at one location. Here's the what I call the double station switch. You would probably call it a three-way, which is a horrible name, because this switch here, you'll find two of these in play. When you have a circuit that uses this setup, you'll have two of these at two locations, and that's why my term makes more sense. And this would be what you would call a four-way, but this isn't actually a four-way. This is a double pole switch. I'm just showing you this to show how the terminals would look in the back of a four-way, but it would look like that. And this is a double pole. I'll talk about that later. But anyway, the point is, it's the triple station switch, in my terminology, won't have the words on and off on it. It'll be like this. You'll have your two traveler terminals here, and then you have your two travel terminals here. I can't talk. I'm downstairs here in the basement freezing. Okay. So once again, you have your single station switch, double station, and triple station. Okay, but let's look at the receptacle in a little bit more detail here. Okay, the receptacle is a device, okay, but it's a specific device installed in an outlet, which I showed you. It includes either A, contact slots that will receive a pronged attachment plug, or B, a socket that will receive a lamp. Okay, so here are two different examples of receptacles. This is a plug receptacle. This is a standalone receptacle, a standalone device, right? This is a lamp receptacle. Inside there is the receptacle. I call it in my system a lamp receptacle. I don't call it a socket. And why? Because in the United States, a socket is a socket, just this here. But in the United Kingdom and let's say England, the socket is their receptacle. See, they call this a socket. So I cleaned that up and made that perfectly clear. So what you have then is, ultimately, for the receptacle as a device, it can be a plug receptacle, right? Or it can be a lamp receptacle. A lamp goes in here. You would probably call it a light bulb, but it's actually really a lamp. A bulb is like a thing you plant in the ground when you want tulips and you want things to grow. So the point is, these are the two forms of receptacles in my thinking, my system, my perspective, all right? Then the third component of my station is threefold. It can be as simple as a cover that covers your device and ultimately will cover the whole outlet. All right, the outlet's the part you generally don't see and don't touch. Okay, so you'd have a cover, a simple cover, or it could be a cover like this for a 4-inch box. And then another form of protection is the grounding. The grounding of the device, the grounding of the equipment, that's a form of protection. And then finally, you have in your service entrance panel, you have the breaker that will shut off the whole entire circuit if there's a problem, if there's too much current flowing. So protection comes in several different forms, but it's very simple. All right, so now I'm going to end this video because it's pretty long, and then tomorrow I'll get into the really good stuff, the really meaty stuff, and explain why station is a really good word to use to describe the electrical circuit. Okay, thank you and good night.